Karz talks, the facts are opinions and opinions are facts. And if you happen to see this video right here from The Drive, I have no clue what they are thinking of when they did this video. And I honestly don't even know if this is like top tier rage bait, but there is so much wrong with this video. It had my blood boiling. So in my video, we're going to talk about how this video is complete BS. All right. So if you've watched this video, then great. If you haven't, you need to go watch it after my video because you got to see this. It's unbelievable. Either way, I'm not going to play a bunch of their video. I'm just going to play snippets of it just to show you kind of what they were doing. So first and foremost, I mean, the title, there's no such thing as snap oversteer. I mean, come on, guys. You are a channel with almost 2 million subscribers. You're supposed to be a reputable source of automotive information. And then you publish a video and say there's no such thing as snap oversteer. And then try to prove it while simultaneously proving that there is such a thing as snap oversteer. We'll get into that. So yeah, the whole premise of the video is just wild to me, right? They go and basically choose two notorious cars that were well known for snap oversteer. The S2K, Honda S2000, and then later they have a Toyota MR2. Both were notorious for snap oversteer. Throughout the whole video, just blame the driver. It's not the car, it's the driver. And they did everything they could to do so. With that said, they did do a good job of showing a few other scenarios. So they did a scenario here with the S2K showing what lift off oversteer is and demonstrated that. And then they did do some good stuff. I'm not saying the whole video is bull crap, but pretty much the whole video is bull crap if they're trying to disprove snap oversteer. See, they just did this lift off oversteer, demonstrated that. You know, they tell you how that happens and why that happens and how to correct it. Okay, that's pretty cool, right? You should probably be aware. Most people who've been driving, you know, performance cars long enough have already learned that, right? So then they force the car to do a snap oversteer and they show you why it is. And they basically say it's his input. His input caused the car to snap oversteer, which happens right here. You know, the back end kicked it out to the left, counter steer to the right, and it snapped back to the left. And then they use this little RC model, which is, you know, it's fine. It demonstrates the whole point of why snap oversteer happens. And they basically go and show that snap oversteer is because there is a inertia of weight distribution shifting from one corner of the car to the other. That's what snap oversteer is. That's what causes it. It is physics in action. And they show you this with this RC car. Like, okay, this is what caused snap oversteer. Then they just say, oh, it's not snap oversteer, it's just oversteer. Snap oversteer is nothing but a myth. It's all in your head. It's because you are a crappy driver and you just don't know better. And I'm like, oh my God, you can't be serious, guys. I mean, this is either grade A trolling, I mean, on a professional level, or they are serious. I can't tell. Going back to the part where he forced the S2K into a snap oversteer, he did mention what to do to recover it and the counter steer back. That seems pretty obvious. If the car snaps one way, the counter steer the other. Except that doesn't always happen. You can't always recover a car from snap oversteer by just counter steering. Ask me how I know, because I know, and I found out the hard way that doesn't work. Anyone who knows anything about driving, and I'm not even talking about on a professional level, you've driven a car for at least 10 years, a high performance car, you've been in rear wheel drive cars, you've had plenty of experience. You know what can happen. You know how quickly things can go south, okay? So I don't need to get all crazy in the details, but for these guys to say snap oversteer does not exist is just mind-boggling. Snap oversteer does exist, and it exists in every vehicle, because even in their description, they say snap oversteer is one of those things people say to criticize sports cars like the iconic S2000, but does it actually exist? Not really. So they're defending the car, not to say the S2K was bad. It's a great car, same as the MR2, but they both had tendencies to easily snap oversteer, and it was proven. They stopped MR2 sales because of that. Honda redesigned the S2K because of that, the suspension. So if it didn't exist, then why did they need to make improvements? Because there was something causing it. Now, snap oversteer can happen in any car, right? Any car can experience it, but it's more prominent in rear-wheel drive cars, just the way the geometry is in the drive wheels pushing the car rather than something like front-wheel drive pulling. But it can happen in anything. When you have all of the weight of a car, not every car weighs 2,000 pounds, 3,000 pounds. We're not driving race cars around. Cars nowadays practically average 2 tons for just a regular car. A sport coupe, a Mustang, you're talking about 3,800 pounds to 4,000 pounds. BMW M8 coupes and such, over 4,000 pounds or more. I think they're even more. I don't even know. We have so many cars now that are really heavy. 2 tons on average, Challengers and all these things, 2 tons of metal. And then once things start shifting, side to side really fast, you have a lot of weight. And depending on your speed, you have that inertia. It's physics, man. Look, I'm not a genius on physics, man, but it's just basic stuff, right? You got all that inertia going one way and then quickly wants to go the other, because this car is trying to balance the weight on the suspension. Stuff is loading up one side of the springs, shifting it to the other side of the suspension, and that weight shift or weight distribution is pushing the inertia to one corner of the car. That causes that snap oversteer. Factory cars with factory bushings, rubber bushings, once again, same thing. If you have a car with rubber bushings that flex and do so to reduce noise and vibration, it creates deflection in the suspension. It allows things to, move and rotate in very subtle ways. And when that happens, that also allows weight distribution from corner to corner to be distributed or transferred more easily than if you had stiff bushings or stiff connections between all of your suspension components. You don't find that on road-going vehicles because it would make it a pain. It would make it unenjoyable to drive, that you wouldn't want to drive it. But on race vehicles that purely live at a track, they're using poly bushings, or they're not using bushings at all. There are straight connections between their components. And this is so they minimize that possibility of deflection, keep the car stable as possible when cornering. These are road-going vehicles. Even though they're modified, they're road-going vehicles. So they have suspension of a road-going vehicle. Different suspension geometries also play a big factor. There's so many variables. And I think that's more or less my point to this, is that they basically say that, you're the one who puts yourself into snap oversteer that doesn't exist, and only you can get yourself out of it by countersteering. And that's simply not true. There are way too many variables that come into play with this, that you could not save a car once it snaps oversteers. They're also showing cars, they're on a racetrack, right? They're on, looks like some type of race facility. Oh, come on, why is it playing an ad? Maybe they're on like some airport or something. So perhaps not the best surface that they could be driving on. I'm not sure exactly where they are, but I can guarantee you they're not using all season tires. I guarantee you both of these cars have high performance summer tires on them. They're going to get good grip. These are dry conditions in hot, I assume, weather. So the rubber's going to be soft. It's going to want to grip. Try recovering a snap oversteer in wet weather or when it's cold out. You don't have to be a bad driver for something to happen. You could just be driving along in your rear-wheel drive car on wet roads. And even if you slow down, you know, you're being cautious, you slow down, but then there's a pothole in the road up ahead with a bunch of water in it. Well, you hit that hole, the water basically, you know, it kicks at the back end of your car. You instinctively counter steer. The car snaps back the other way. You try to counter steer again, but you have no grip because guess what? The roads are wet. And you have 2 tons of a Dodge Challenger now sliding into the guardrail of a highway uncontrollably. There's just certain conditions that you have no control of. No matter how much you think you have control, you do not have control. Is snap oversteer preventable? Yes, it can be mitigated and prevented, but it's still, once again, it's dependent on the vehicle. Not every vehicle can be pushed to the same limit and tolerate the same aggressiveness of driving than others. You know, some will reach that limit quicker and be more willing to snap oversteer than other cars. Different suspension geometries and designs will be more susceptible to that. Different layouts, front engine, rear wheel drive, front engine, front wheel drive, front engine, all wheel drive, you know, rear engine, all wheel drive, mid engine, you know, there's all these different things and all that affects weight distribution. All of it is a variable. But these guys seem to think that none of that applies. Physics don't apply. There's only 2 cars ever in the world that have a problem with snap oversteer, and that it's all in the driver. And yeah, it's just madness that they said this. I mean, I can't get over it. You know, they're basically saying it's your inputs. Now, I will say your inputs can mitigate snap oversteer in a car that is limited. You try pushing a car with bad suspension, bad layout too hard, you're going to get it. So yeah, in that case, they're right, but they're also saying it's purely just due to your inputs. Like as long as you put your inputs in right, it's not the car. Yes, it is, because as I said before, every car has its limits and they're all different. Even when modified, they're all different. Different modifications change everything. It's just crazy to me. And I had to talk about this. Am I really, truly just not getting this? Am I wrong for thinking this? Or is this just ridiculous? I'm not a professional driver by any means. I've been driving cars for a long time now. So, and I've driven many rear-wheel drive cars, powerful rear-wheel drive cars. I've driven all-wheel drive, front-wheel drive. I've driven everything. Turbocharged V8s, manual transmissions, supercharged vehicles, rear engine or mid-engine cars. I've driven it all. I've gotten myself in trouble with rear-wheel drive cars. I made some mistakes, but I've also had rear-wheel drive cars where I drove the snot out of and never had a problem once. They were different cars. They all could tolerate different things, and they all reacted differently to my inputs, which could have been the same. You know, I could not push one car the same as I could push another car. They were all different. And some cars were more easy to control than others, and some cars were more predictable to control than others. To purely say this is a driver issue is absurd, because it is indeed not just the driver issue. My argument on this has always been it's a 2-part problem. It is 1 part car, 2nd part driver. If your car is crap, it's got crap suspension, it's going to handle like crap, you're going to have a bad time. If your car is great and it is set up perfectly, but you are not that great of a driver, or you're very new to driving. Let's say, you know, you just got your license last week, right? You know, you go into it and yeah, you end up in a wall because you pushed it too hard. Now, I don't know where they draw the line, what they define as bad driver. I don't know. I have no clue. And I honestly don't know where. I mean, I feel like most people know how, you know, just the basics on how to control a vehicle, right? Especially enthusiasts. We all make mistakes when we learn to drive, right? Does that make us bad drivers? No, it just makes us inexperienced. We got to learn, right? There's a difference between bad and inexperienced, okay? Just because you make a mistake doesn't mean you're bad. It just means you didn't know better. You don't know what you don't know. Now, if you learn from that and you move on and don't make that mistake again, then you progress yourself up and you become a much more confident and competent driver. So you can get into cars that are more likely to not snap oversteer and not have a problem. And the crazy part is when you get into cars like this, what you learn is it's not knowing how hard you can push the car. It's knowing when and how you can push the car. And what I mean by that, okay, so rear-wheel drive car, you're not going to realistically take a 600-700 horsepower rear-wheel drive car and punch it around a turn because it's probably going to end bad. Even the best drivers out there, if they tried doing that, they would probably end up in a spin or something. They would lose control because it's just a matter of not knowing what to do. Kind of goes back to what the video said. It's about your inputs. And like I said, some of the video, they have good points. Being a good driver in a high performance car isn't so much knowing what to do when things go bad. It's what not to do so things don't go bad. I think that is kind of what they were trying to say, but they just took it way too far because, they're trying to say that things that do actually exist don't exist. It just in a weird way to defend these cars. Not like they were ever bad cars. Like, okay, yeah, we know they snap oversteer. Does that make them terrible cars? No. We all love the MR2s. We all love S2Ks. We don't care. Mustangs, Mustangs are notorious for snap oversteer. Does that stop people from buying Mustangs and liking Mustangs? No. Mustang's one of the most popular selling sports car out there next to like the Miata, right? They're everywhere. But you push a Mustang too hard, and well, guess what? It's going to take you for a ride. And in some cases, especially with these newer cars, as I mentioned earlier in the video, if you have that problem, the back end kicks out, you counter steer, and then the front snaps the opposite direction, you might not be able to recover. You might not have the space to recover because you have a lot of weight just shifting around. I want to see how quickly they could recover a Challenger or a Charger that weighs 4,200 pounds, or something even heavier than that. Would it be more of a handful to counter steer back, or would it work? My guess is they wouldn't be, it wouldn't be as easy to get back under control. It would take more space for you to do that, because if you look in the example of him as he has the S2K snap oversteer, see how much room he took up. Let me see if I can get another. I know they have another camera angle here. So by the time he counter steered and regained control of the car, he was already way over in the other lane. If this was on a public road and you had something like this happen, by the time you already went from this lane to that, you could have hit another car. You could have hit something on the other side of the road. You could have hit a wall if you were on a highway and something like this happened and you were in a lane next to a barrier wall. You would hit the wall before you would have recovered the car. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's not realistic how they portrayed this information. And I think that's my problem. A lot of what they said was good. They had a lot of good stuff in here. But to say that snap oversteer doesn't exist is just mind-boggling. And the way they presented the information is just so disingenuous because it's not realistic. These are not, when people have problems and they encounter things with cars, they're not happening on controlled environments. They're happening on public roads. People are having fun. Not everyone goes to a racetrack. People are having fun and they get themselves in a little trouble. Some cars, people can push harder than others. Even if you're not a pro driver, some cars are just more easier to control than others. Going with that, knowing your car is equally important. You get into a car for the first time and it all feels foreign, right? But you drive it a year or 2 years and then you learn, you start learning that car. When things kind of, where you can push it, how you can push it. And, that's a big thing is knowing your car. Getting into a car that you're not familiar with and instantly trying to push it might not be a good idea. You might not be a pro driver, but just give yourself a couple years to learn the car, and then you can push it and not have trouble. Sometimes you just have to learn the vehicle because some vehicles are just not predictable. And I've learned that the hard way. I've learned not every vehicle you can push the same way. And they seem to think that it don't matter. Like you can, do whatever you want, and snap oversteer don't exist. And it's completely, you can correct it and you can prevent it. And it's just ridiculous. Yeah, you can prevent it by being really easy on your inputs with a car that is more likely to have snap oversteer. But then again, if you are actually racing your car and you want something competitive, you're giving up time because the car is limited by how much you can push it before something bad happens. How clear does this have to be? I don't understand why it's so hard for people to understand this. I could go on and on and on about this, really. It really could be never ending for me. But before I end the video, I want to go into the comments because, this is just obviously they have stroked the egos. This video has stroked the egos of so many keyboard racers. I can feel the moisture coming through the screen right now. It is that bad. But there are some realistic comments right here. AP1 owner, meaning Gen 1 S2K, before they made the changes, the ones that were most notorious for snap oversteer. AP1 owner here, still alive, but it definitely has a tendency to step out way more than the more neutral AP2. When Honda revised the suspension on the AP2 S2Ks, they were a lot more tolerant. Same driver, two different cars, and he admits there was a difference. Thankfully, there are grounded comments. I agree with the sentiment, disagree with the statement. Snap oversteer does exist, but it is an engineering failure of the suspension that causes sudden movement or force progressively loaded. Binding joints, classic example. In a properly set up car where mods are done properly, snap oversteer does not exist. I wouldn't say that. I would say it's just, it's minimized to a point where it's probably not going to be a problem. But yeah, basically the same thing I said. Suspension geometry, deflection in the suspension components, weight transfer between one corner to the other. And this is great right here. I actually used this clip in my last video I made, which you can watch, over that way. It's Randy Pops, who was driving a Corvette. And he even said it was a handful. Here is the quote from him. He is a well-known professional race car driver. I went out in the Corvette in full race mode. I had snap oversteer and entry oversteer. I felt like I was wrestling alligators. I just wasn't happy. I hit the switch, put it over in sport on the shocks, which softens up the shock absorbers. The softer setting changed the whole experience. The different settings changed the whole dynamic of the car. Once again, this is a two-part problem. One part driver, two-part car. It is simply not a single part issue. And it's just, it looks like there's a lot more since I first watched this video. It looks like a lot more people have chimed in on looking at this video like that it's a bit misleading. Good vid with some caveats. The AP2CR was the peak of Honda's refinement of the S2K suspension. However, the older AP1 models have an older version of the upper control arms. Driving in this video are carried out under more controlled environment. Thank you if someone else is picking up on that. Things are different in normal life, real life situations like uncontrollable factors. A friend of mine passed away driving his AP1 S2K on the evening while going over a wet steel plate at the speed limit at night, resulting in sudden oversteer. The car slid out, went into a light pole, and we lost him that night. Unfortunately, that's pretty sad. But just like that person said, in the real world where 90% of these cars are driven, you can't just recover by going, stuff happens. The back end of cars can kick out for reasons that weren't your control, that weren't your input. When I had my Mustang, my 2020 Mustang, I was on the highway. There were some parts of the road that were patchy, so they were holding water, and it had rained. There wasn't a lot of rain on the road, but I wasn't going super fast. The speed limit's 70, and I was going probably just a little under because Like I said, there wasn't a whole bunch of rain on the road. But the moment I went over that, little rough section of the road that had water pooled up on it, that made my butthole clench tighter than a weekend in prison. I almost thought that was going to be it. But I felt that back end step out, quickly, snapped the front, counter steered as they prove in this video. And thankfully, I kept the car straight. And I went home white as a ghost that day. I was whiter than Miracle Whip on Wonder Bread. Stuff happens. It's not always the driver. Different cars handle different ways. Different cars don't always handle the same or can handle the same tolerances. You have to be careful when you drive a car. It's best when you get cars like this to learn the car first. And just to be easy with it, right? Just don't go out there trying to show off the moment you get it, because you're not going to have it for long. The more you get to know the car, the better you understand it. Then you start modifying it, and then the car becomes more competent. You become more confident and competent as a driver as you build your car. You build yourselves together, and then before you know it, you have a combination of a very good driver who knows their car, that's upgraded their car, that handles a lot better and can take the limits a lot harder than it used to. And that's really what it boils down to. There's really not much more to say over that. So anyways, that's all I got to say about this. You let me know what you think. Put your thoughts in the comments below. Otherwise, going to wrap it up here for the video. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Share with everyone you know. If you want to see more content like this and you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Keep a lookout for the next Cars Talks video.